रिकॉर्ड में भी उसे देख पाते हैं। और तीसरा, जब कार्यक्रम की समाप्ति हो जाएगी फिर उसके बाद आपको फीडबैक फॉर्म दिया जाएगा, वो भी मेरे लिए महत्वपूर्ण है। तो ये तीनों रिस्पॉन्स जब आपके पास आ जाते हैं तो हमारे यहाँ पे एक्सेल शीट में हम लोग उस डेटा को फिल्टर करते हैं और उसके बाद हम लोग ईच रिपोर्ट जारी करते हैं। माइक्रोफोन ऑन है तो इसे म्यूट पे रखें। मनीष कुमार जी, आप सबों से अनुरोध किया गया है आज सुबह ही कि हम सबों को सतर्क रहना है, जिससे कार्यक्रम हम लोग सुचारू रूप से चला सकें और कार्यक्रम के बीच में कोई व्यवधान नहीं हो। तो ये मैं कह रहा था कि आप सबों के ई सर्टिफिकेट्स में कोई परेशानी नहीं है, सबों को प्राप्त होगा, लेकिन जो हमारे रिकॉर्ड के लिए ज़रूरी है वो ये 3 चीज़ें आपको भी करनी है। तभी हम एक्सेल शीट तैयार करते हैं, तीनों जगह आपके प्रेजेंस को मार्क करते हैं और उसके बाद हम आपके उसके बाद भी मेरे पास 2-3 क्वेरी आए हैं, रिक्वेस्ट आए हैं, तो मैंने उन्हें कहा है कि निश्चित रूप से कोई चिंता की बात नहीं है, आपको प्राप्त होगा और हमारा रिकॉर्ड दुरुस्त रहना चाहिए, वेरीफाई करके ही हम आपको ई सर्टिफिकेट जारी करेंगे। तो एक और सूचना के तौर पे आप सबों को अभी जो हमारा HRDC का सेंटर है वो तो दरियापुर में पटना ट्रेनिंग कॉलेज कैंपस में अवस्थित है, लेकिन विश्वविद्यालय की ओर से हम लोगों को पटना साइंस कॉलेज कैंपस में जगह मिल गई है और डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ केमिस्ट्री के सामने एक नई बिल्डिंग हम लोगों की तैयार हुई है। वो वोकेशनल कोर्स की बिल्डिंग है, लेकिन उसमें ग्राउंड फ्लोर पे हमें भी वो स्पेस मिला है। तो हमारी HRDC की टीम हम लोग इस महीने में, जून महीने में हमारी कोशिश है कि उसे फंक्शनल ऑफिस वहाँ हम लोग शिफ्ट करेंगे और फिर हम लोग अपने वेबसाइट पे भी आपको सूचित कर देंगे। फिर हमारा पत्राचार का जो माध्यम होगा, जो पता होगा, वो बदल जाएगा और दरियापुर की जगह हम लोग पटना साइंस कॉलेज कैंपस में अपने जो भी दस्तावेज हैं या जो डॉक्यूमेंट्स हैं या आप संपर्क करना चाहेंगे तो वहाँ आप मिल सकते हैं। We have also requested the Department of Education, Government of Bihar, to help us in developing a good classroom for the benefit of the students, because the HRDC is going to play one very important role as far as the implementation of NEP is concerned. तो हम लोग UGC का वेट भी कर रहे हैं, वहाँ के आदेशों का, निर्देशों का, कि हमारे कार्यक्रम लगातार ये ऑनलाइन ही चलेंगे कि ऑफलाइन भी हमें करना है, क्योंकि ऑनलाइन ऑफलाइन में कुछ फाइनेंशियल कंस्ट्रेंट्स होते हैं और यूजीसी के सपोर्ट से ही हम लोग ऑफलाइन क्लासेस को ज़्यादा विधिवत हम लोग चला पाएंगे। सो वी आर वेटिंग फॉर द रिस्पॉन्स और इसीलिए फैकल्टी इंडक्शन प्रोग्राम और रिफ्रेशर कोर्स को अगस्त के बाद रखा गया है। अभी हम लोग जून जुलाई में जो निर्धारित ऑनलाइन क्लासेस हैं उसे ही हम लोग संचालित कर पा रहे हैं। तो वेरी गुड रिस्पॉन्स एंड Subodh Sachan ji, Shri Subodh Sachan ji, if you have joined, just may I know, and I just to see whether your presence is there in the group. Okay, still to join, no problem. So presently I am sitting in the Patna University Central Library, from where we are conducting this online meet, and the technical team led by Khalid ji and Umar ji, they are here. Ashok Jha ji may also be joining us soon. Ashok Jha ji, whether you have joined, आप लाइब्रेरी में शायद नीचे हैं या
प्रणाम सर।
हाँ, अच्छा, वेरी गुड very good, Ashok Jha ji. You were yesterday you were at Sitamarhi, so whether you have reached Patna or on the way?
Sir, on the way. I will be reaching in
okay,
around
no
1:30, sir. 1:30 or 2, sir.
Okay. आप पार्टिसिपेंट्स की ओर से भी अगर कोई ऐसे कुछ उपयुक्त सुझाव हैं तो हमारे पास 5 मिनट हैं, हम लोग सुन सकते हैं।
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, Ruchi ji. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Once again, very good morning to all the dear participants of this webinar on artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we are waiting for the participants to join. And as communicated to you earlier, we'll start our program at 11:30. As per the record, the screen in front of me, it shows around 65 to 56, 68 participants they have joined, and few of them they have joined through the YouTube link also. So it's nice that a large number of registered teacher participants they have joined this program on very important aspect related to national education policy, which talks about implementation of technology improve the educational system, where the artificial intelligence and machine learning and other aspects which becomes very, very significant. So, as informed earlier, that we have kept a series of activities online for the benefit of the teachers, and under this, as all of you know, that one important aspect about the NEP monthly workshop on different aspects of NEP. First one we had in this June, I think in the last week of June, we'll again have one component of NEP exclusively for the benefit of the teachers. Besides the NEP, there are other components also which have been specified by UGC, which we will be conducting through webinar or short-term courses, where this artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning ML becomes important. And besides the technology aspects related to NEP, we'll also have some aspects related to environment, climate change, and very, very important segment in educational system. Now it is becoming the disaster management. So the students, staff, and faculty members, all of us have to be prepared to learn some of the basic aspects of disaster management. So that is one very important part of our curriculum, which is going to be now. So these are some of the common events which will be organized by the HRDC, and there are some specific programs, as all of you know, that the refresher course and the faculty induction course is organized regularly. So again, I just wish to inform you that we are waiting for the guidance from the UGC to the methodology. We have to organize it in online or offline. There are always I'm getting queries from the teachers of the state about the conduct mode. So I think by the end of this month we'll be getting the details how we are going to conduct the refresher course and faculty induction program. I think already we are left with a few minutes, couple of minutes, and then let me see whether Shri Subodh Sachan, whether you have joined our program. Maybe still to join. We'll wait for Subodh Sachan to join for this event. I can see the Chirantanji. Chirantanji, hello. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, sir. I'm fine. How are you,
good morning. Sir? Yes, चिरंतन जी हमारे फैकल्टी इंडक्शन प्रोग्राम जनवरी फरवरी में ऑर्गेनाइज किया गया था. He was one of the very active participant in the FIP course. I can see Dr. Sananda Sinha also joining this program. Besides, there are other participants also, Rajiv Kumar ji. Good morning, sir. Yes, Anurag ji and other participants also. जब ये कार्यक्रम प्रारंभ करेंगे उस समय आप सबों से हम निवेदन करेंगे कि आप अपने कैमरा को ऑन कर लीजिएगा, जिससे हम लोग एक स्क्रीनशॉट अपने रिकॉर्ड के लिए रखेंगे, और उसके बाद फिर आप अपने कैमरा और माइक्रोफोन को म्यूट कर लेंगे, या कैमरा आप ऑन भी रख सकते हैं. देयर इज नो प्रॉब्लम एज सच. सो आई कैन सी teachers from Patna University, Patliputra University, and all other universities of Bihar. Dr. Kirti Jha from Patna Women's College. Kirti ji, how are you?
Fine, sir. Pranam, sir.
Namaskar. Kirti Jha ji was associated with me during the MSS tenure. I was heading the National Services Scheme unit of Patna University. She acted as the program officer at Patna Women's College. So, being involved in co-curricular activities makes you very active. You may start thinking in terms of the development of your institution, development of yourself, and after all, the development of the students. हम लोग वेट कर रहे हैं, और समय तो लगभग हो चला है, और मेरे सामने वो बड़ा स्क्रीन लगा है, so that I can view the participants in bigger screen. हम अपने टेक्निकल टीम को आज ये एक अपनी तरफ से सुझाव भी देंगे कि आफ्टर द इवेंट लेट्स सी फिल्टर आउट द number of participants from each of the universities, and let's see what is the number from different universities of Bihar, or maybe we may have participants from outside Bihar or central universities situated in Bihar. तो ये भी एक स्टैटिस्टिकल डेटा हमारे लिए मिलेगा, तो ये अच्छा होगा, हम लोग आप लोगों से भी ये शेयर कर सकते हैं। आने वाले समय में हो सकता है कि विश्वविद्यालयों में और दूसरे कॉलेजेस में परीक्षाएं भी शुरू हो जाएं, तो हम लोग अपने ग्रुप में कुछ डेट्स आपसे शेयर कर सकते हैं कि जिस दिन परीक्षाएं न हो या मे बी अगर छुट्टी का दिन हो तो उसी दिन हम लोग अपनी ऑनलाइन प्रोग्राम को अरेंज कर सकेंगे, या फिर अगर संभव हो सके तो वर्किंग आवर के बाद का भी हम लोग प्लान कर सकते हैं। अगर लगातार परीक्षाएं हमारी चल रही हैं तो लिंक और हमारा पेस कहीं मेंटेन रहे, ये भी हम लोगों को देखना है, और उस कारण से ही हम लोग इस तरह के इवेंट्स को रेगुलर वे में प्लान कर रहे हैं कि एक्टिविटीज को अरेंज कर सकें। Shri Subodh Sachan ji, I think you have joined us for this program.
Namaskar, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Subodh Sachan ji, how are you?
बिल्कुल बढ़िया सर, कैसे हैं आप?
मैं बहुत बढ़िया हूँ, और आप देखिए, आपको सुनने के लिए, आपके विचारों को जानने के लिए बिहार के तमाम विश्वविद्यालयों से एक अच्छी खासी जो नए हमारे टीचर्स हैं, नए पुराने सभी यहाँ ज्वाइन किए हैं, और हम लोग एक बहुत ही लाभप्रद सेशन यहाँ आज आयोजित करने वाले हैं। So very nice meeting you in spite of your very busy schedule, because you are handling the startups pan India और पूरे कंट्री वाइड की एक्टिविटीज को आप मॉनिटर कर रहे हैं। उसके बावजूद आप पटना यूनिवर्सिटी के लिए आपने समय निकाला है, ये हम सबों के लिए बहुत ही खुशी की बात है और बहुत ही गर्व की बात है। तो अब आप क्योंकि हमारे साथ एसोसिएटेड हैं, तो कीपिंग इन माइंड द डिसिप्लिन एंड द टाइम, now let's start formally this aspect of webinar which we are having on artificial intelligence and machine learning. So on behalf of the HRDC Patna University, the staff members and students and faculty members who have joined this event, we are honored to have today Shri Subodh Sachan ji, who is the director of the software technology parts in India and handling the startups and innovations unit. As all of us know that the National Education Policy 2020 talks about many of the new innovations which we are thinking of, and there is one component of intervention of technology in NEP. और जैसा हम सभी जानते हैं कि आने वाले समय में डिजिटल प्लेटफॉर्म पे हम सभी लोग जुड़ रहे हैं, और सारी जगहों पे, नॉट ओनली एजुकेशन, हर सेगमेंट में डिजिटल टेक्नोलॉजी का इंटरवेंशन हो रहा है, चाहे वो मेडिकल फील्ड हो, चाहे एग्रीकल्चर हो, चाहे एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन हो। और इसी कारण से हम ये कह सकते हैं कि एजुकेशन को भी हम बिल्कुल इससे हम अलग नहीं रख सकते। So that's why this one very important component of technology intervention in NEP, it has been designed as such, and हमारा भारतवर्ष तो अभी हम लोग ग्लोबल लीडर कह सकते हैं टेक्नोलॉजी के संदर्भ में, और उसमें कई नए टेक्नोलॉजीज जो डेवलप करके आ रहे हैं, उसके बारे में हम सबों को कम से कम एक परिचय होना चाहिए कि क्या हम कर सकते हैं या हमारे भारतवर्ष में क्या उसकी योजनाएं हैं। और अगर हम लोग सुबोध सचन जी से अगर मैं ये कह सकूं कि अभी हम लोग पैंडेमिक के समय से ऑनलाइन एजुकेशन या एजुकेशनल इंस्टीट्यूशन में डिजिटल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को और मजबूत करना, टीचिंग प्लेटफॉर्म को डेवलप करना, टीचिंग के टूल्स को ऑनलाइन माध्यम से ले आना, या कंटेंट डेवलपमेंट, ई कंटेंट डेवलपमेंट, और टेक्नोलॉजी और साइंस के जो बैकग्राउंड है उसमें वर्चुअल लेबोरेटरीज के बारे में हम लोग बातचीत कर रहे हैं। And not only that, even the administrative part of the university or educational system, where the examination, online or admission, there are many important components which could be very well taken by the technology intervention. तो इन्हीं सब बातों को देखते हुए यूजीसी का हमारा जो निर्देश प्राप्त हुआ है, उसमें हमारे टीचर्स को एआई और एमएल के विषय में एक बेसिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग देनी है. दैट्स व्हाई श्री सुबोध सचन जी, आपको मैंने कहा था कि द पार्टिसिपेंट्स ऑफ दिस वेबिनार, they are from all the disciplines, science, commerce, arts, humanities, law, इस तरह से. तो एक अच्छा सेशन हम लोग अभी सुनने वाले हैं. And for the benefit of the participants, let me just read out a small introduction about Shri Subodh Sachan ji. इससे पहले कि मैं आप सबों को ये बताऊं, मेरे लिए बड़े गर्व की बात थी कि last November when we visited Goa during the International Science Festival, so that was the first interaction with Shri Subodh Sachan ji, and I was very much impressed by the way he handled the one important component in the segment, AI, virtual reality, augmented reality, और स्टूडेंट्स और यूथ जो वहाँ आए थे, आपने जिस प्रकार से उन्हें मोटिवेट किया, प्रेरित किया, मुझे बहुत खुशी है कि आपसे इंटरेक्शन हुआ और आपके मिलने का लाभ आज हम सबों को भी यहाँ मिल रहा है. So dear participants, Shri Subodh Sachan ji is the Director Software Technology Park of India, and he is heading Pan-India startup initiatives of Software Technology Parks of India, including establishment of domain-specific centers of entrepreneurship in emerging technologies like Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, blockchain, augmented reality, virtual reality. Shri Subodh Sachan ji is an alumnus of IIT Roorkee and IIM Bangalore. He is a senior professional from industry who joined STPI after working in the industry at global level in various capacities. He has worked in diversified areas of the technology industry, a major portion of which is into telecom and related fields. In particular, Shri Subodh Sachan ji has been part of startups in leadership role right from inception to successful listing of the company. On the other side of the industry spectrum, he has also been part of senior management in multinational companies and global telecom like Motorola and Nokia. He has successfully headed the Bangalore chapter of IIM Ahmedabad Center for Innovation, Incubation and Entrepreneurship. So with this brief introduction about a well-known personality in the field of technology and IT, may I request now Shri Subodh Sachan ji to take over and deliberate upon the artificial intelligence and machine learning for the benefit of dear teacher participants. Thank you, and invitation from HRDC. Over to you, Shri Sachan ji.
Thank you, and thanks a lot, Dr. Atul Pandey ji. I think it's always honor and privilege to just also interact with you, but also as you probably found that I'm suitable enough and capable enough to talk about to the esteemed the community of educators. I think it's always privilege to be in be with the academic institutions, though I'm since out of academics from the study perspective and also out of touch with the teaching aspects, but I'm sure in the next an hour or so I'll try to share some of the thoughts which probably may be very meaningful to the community which is probably listening. So again, Dr. Pandey, Director UGC and HRDC Patna University, and to all esteemed colleagues who have joined in, I'm really thankful for having me here, and also letting me talk about AI ML. What I thought was, because from a career perspective, yes, I have played a lot of role in terms of bringing technology solutions over the last 22 years, but lately working more in the startup ecosystem, and hence sometimes you tend to be generalist rather than the subject matter expert. So again, disclaimer, some of the information which I may be sharing, which is already probably known to the faculty and to the people who are listening to me today, so spare your time with me, and probably it may be repetition, but let it be. I think what I thought is I'll cover today, before I bring my presentation, it's just not about technology perspective what AI and ML has in future, right? But also about how educational ecosystem is across the world, right? And with some use cases, and I'm happy to share that one of my team member was able to put up what is happening within the ecosystem of AI ML in leading developing countries or leading developed countries, for example, right, within the educational system. So probably that may be somewhat helpful. As you rightly said, new education policy or NEP 2020 has a lot of focus and a lot of emphasis in terms of what requires to be done with technology and why technology, education and technology, especially going to elementary school to the undergrads and the postgrads, it's becoming very important, right? So with those initial thoughts, let me try to share my screen, and let me know if the screen is visible to all of you. I hope my screen is started to appear right now.
Yes, sir, it's visible, sir.
Yes, sir, it is visual.
Good. So let me talk about how AI and ML applications are happening in this forum, where it is more targeted towards bringing in people who are interested in knowing NEP. Well, I think all of us know that starting probably way back in 2017 or 2016, as a technology industry, we call ourselves to be part of the fourth industrial revolution, right? And what fourth industrial revolution really talks about is the technology intervention in the whole industry eco chain, right? When I say industry chain, basically right from production, right, to the market, how technology is going to enable bringing in more efficiency, and that's what fourth industrial revolution is all about. It is no more about the second or third industrial revolution, where it was more of mechanical engineering and the aspects of mechanics played a lot of role. But today we're talking about various emerging technologies which are shaping up the new form of the industry, of which we call as future of works as also, right? What is literally what comprises this new technologies, or what comprises this fourth industrial revolution is a multiple technologies, but AI is actually probably the technology which has various arms, various aspects, which is bringing in the changes as we move forward, right? And this is also important because it is as the economy is changing, as we're moving forward, right? The demands of not just the workplaces requires this technology adoption, but when there is an industry need, basically educational ecosystem and educational ladder has to bring in these technologies and bring in the elements of the technology into educational, formal education as well, right? So world over, today, if you ask me, education policy makers have come forward, right? I know how, and started looking into how various computer technologies, AI, machine learning, data analytics, IoT, blockchain, etc., is going to, should be brought into the educational ecosystem, right? And I think NEP 2020, if you really ask me, was one such step within our country. And obviously before NEP 2020 also, there has been a lot of intervention in our educational ecosystem to bring in technology in one way or other, right? But what we are trying to do in India, this is something which is being already happening in the countries like Korea, countries like United Kingdom, countries like United States, countries like China and Japan, where technology has played a key role in their evolution in the last, if I say so, in the last 5 decades or 6 decades or so, right? So hence this becomes very important topic. But very clearly, what does AI really means, right? I think most of us are very clearly aware about, the power of AI is about, how machines can think like human, right? And I think when machines have to think like humans, they need to make a decision. They need to understand the data. They need to understand, what does the data mean really for them. And then it's not about understanding the data, but also about decision making. And that is what AI is all about, right? And obviously AI has multiple layers, multiple tiers, right? But eventually, in a very simple layman language, is about how do I interpret data, and how do I interpret data with respect to decision makings and with respect to the problem solving, right? And hence I kind of mimic my human mind kind, right? That's what typically AI will consist of. But within AI, if I go back further, right, there are various elements of, what constitutes AI, right? And most of talk about, machine learning, right? When we talk about machine learning as an education ecosystem, if we talk about even when I was part of my engineering education, I remember very well reading about not just the deep learning algorithms, not just reading about the statistical models with respect to finding out the based upon the regression analysis, how the data fits best, right? Or based upon other analysis, what does data really mean, right? I think these things were already taught, right? But when it comes to understanding the data and then applying the same aspects with respect to how do I solve the similar problems when it comes, that is when the deep learning translates to machine learning, and machine learning translates to AI, right? Again, in terms of machine learning, there are various ways, and I think further I will talk about in a few slides, what really machine learning is all about, right? Obviously, researchers across the world, researchers in our country have progressed much in terms of what is the best way to understand the data, whether it is supervised learning, which basically starts with the structural format of understanding the data, and then somebody guiding that this is the way you should learn, or it is completely unsupervised because you don't know what data really is all about, and hence you leave the data and the various mechanisms of understanding the data in the form of unsupervised learning, which eventually results in probably in better clustering and probably in faster approaches as well, right? So this is one part of machine learning, again, which is what AI really is all about. But other aspects of example, when we talk about natural language processing, and I'm sure if we go back to our education, our foundation days of education, I'm sure some of you would have already experienced that when we speak, when we talk, right, how is certain machines are able to understand, right? From there to today, when we talk about the Siris of the world, the Alexas of the world, there is huge progress in terms of natural language processing, right? Today, the response time has come to almost real time. As we speak, we get the reply back. And it's just not about speaking one particular language, but today the algorithms are now so much trained and advanced that even if I speak in language like Hindi, for example, again, please, excuse me, because I'll try to cover most of my, representation in the language of English. But assume this whole conversation, if applied through some kind of, transliteration or speech, each one of you today would be able to get, in your own languages of your choice, right? As I speak in English, the machine can easily translate in a real time, environment, whatever I'm speaking into the language which you can understand, and just not the language, but also the dialect, which is better understandable with people. And that's the progress which has happened in the last 2 decades or 3 decades, if I really, if every one of us can ponder upon. So natural language processing is another arm of AI, right? Similarly, when we talk about understanding the images, understanding the video part, right? So today, if I talk about autonomous driving, right? The way the autonomous driving is being powered is through the computer vision, or through the image recognition algorithms, or through the better understanding about the objects which are being coming, which can be observed through the sensors, which are called cameras, right? And then translated into some decision making, so that my car can actually drive without a driver really focused upon looking into the door. And hence autonomous driving today is being powered through the image recognition, real-time video analytics, coming into play. And that is also very, very important part of the AI as we talk about speech part, which I said earlier. Gone are the days when speech to text conversion happening, text to speech conversions are happening. Today, as I said, it's a speech to speech conversions are happening real time. Speech to speech transliteration is happening real time. Today, if I speak in English, it gets converted to Hindi very quickly in a real time environment. And that's where, this is also one of the very powerful arm, a powerful, a spin-off of the AI, which basically comes into the overall spectrum of AI. Another very important is robotics. Today, I'm sure a lot of people would have heard about how robotics are playing a key role. Today the modern factories which are being set up, right? And I think if somebody can recall, one of the latest modern factory which was set up now has completely automized the whole production operation through robotics, because when we use robotics, it becomes repeatable. The human errors gets reduced, right? And hence, in terms of production, in terms of doing the repeatable job where manual intervention was probably required, robotics plays a key role today. right? Even we talk about the machines going to either the moon or the Mars, right? And today robotics is playing a role, because humans cannot go there, but robots can go over there and they can do the same job in a repeatable format, right? And that's why robotics plays a very critical role of when we want to understand AI. So these are various constituents of AI. But what is very important is some of the aspects of applications, right? I talked about the use cases in terms of production, right? In terms of improving efficiency in the factory world, for example, right? But come to the other part, right? In the customer part, for example, right? Today, the whole the analysis, the customer insight, and the customer experiences are improved, right? I'm sure a lot of you would have experienced when you go to let's say to the Amazon.com or Flipkart.com, right? You're based upon your past history about what you're purchasing, right? Or for example, what you're searching on Google, based upon the cookies which get stored because of Google search, right? Automatically the cart will give you recommendation that what is most likely you would like to want to buy, right? And hence the whole the customer experiences are getting improved through AI, right? And just not about the customer experiences, when we come to the fraud detection, right? In fact, one of the startup which is part of our portfolio is utilizing AI to detect the frauds, when it comes to the foreign transactions, or when it comes to the the transactions coming from outside. They were able to detect that this was a transaction which has spurious in nature, basically, and it was probably related to some kind of terror funding, right? And hence all this is possible because now people have evaluated, have trained their algorithms with the similar use cases, similar historical data, and now apply those algorithms and those biases in detecting something in real-time environments, right? These are the real use cases where companies, where the banks, where other financial institutions are now utilizing AI to really bringing the best customer experiences, as well as bringing efficiency or reducing their own cost, either in the form of frauds, etc., right? Beyond that, if I say if I talk about supply chain, for example, right? Now supply chain is now being powered through not just the digital applications but also through AI, right? For example, one of the startup which is working with us has not digitized the whole supply chain. It is able to now predict when you pluck the fruit from the garden, right, or from the orchards, right, from the apple from the orchards, how long it will be fresh, and hence the person who is picking up the fruit first time, he understands, because he has because the algorithms are now being applied onto the basket of the fruits or basket of the apples, and he knows clearly that this particular the basket has to reach the shelf in the hands of customers in next 3 days or 4 days, and again monitored through the proper supply chain where the digitization is completely being kept in control. So that kind of futuristic real-time use cases are already being applied, whether it is supply chain, whether it is real-time operation management, whether it's customer insight, customer experiences, right? And hence, though, this becomes very important that AI and machine learning is not just understood by the educators, but also by the community which is coming in forward, who can work further on this thing. I'll talk about the skilled shortfall in the skilled manpower, which is that's the reason why educational ecosystem must talk about these emerging technologies. And again, we are only covering AI and ML today, but there are plethora of technologies in AI, ML, and probably IoT is one of the key technologies, at least for this decade, which is also called as decade now, right? Similarly, in machine learning, again, it's a specific branch of AI, right? But more important is that machine learning uses data and algorithms to imitate the way the human learns, right? It is completely deterministic model which machine learning has to really enable, right? But what really I was earlier talking about, now typically machine learning, either supervised learning. When we talk about supervised learning, there is an availability of the training data set which becomes very important. Again, availability of the training data set is something where education institutes across the world have created a lot of libraries, lot of this thing, because when you want to work with the data, you need to mark the data and ensure that the training, and this is where a lot of research or the labs which are within the educational institutes, engineering institutes, or institutes of higher learning have been able to contribute towards the training data. And contribution training data, let me tell you, is very, very important, because unless there is a proper trained data, supervised learning can never happen, and hence the machine learning or the AI algorithm which you're talking about in terms of outcomes will really be faulty, right? And hence the supervised learning requires training data. Similarly, unsupervised learning requires improvement in the algorithmic approach, right? Because this is where a lot of PhDs are happening, a lot of patents are being filed today, because now people talk about just not that mining the data is the only way to understand AI, but also through training, for example, but also to mine the data without knowing anything about the data, right? And this becomes important because when we talk about AI bringing efficiencies, we also need to be aware, the whole the data, understanding of the data, understanding the parameters within data also requires a lot of GPU power, and hence at some way we need to really see the trade-off between the benefit and power consumptions as well. And hence unsupervised learning and the algorithms under unsupervised learnings and the improvements in the algorithms is one key area. And I think this is where our researcher community should really come forward and create a lot of research papers, etc., so that an unsupervised learning arm should grow, because this is where the future is in terms of unsupervised, in terms of overall AI ecosystem, right? If we talk about further going down, what does unsupervised learning really means or supervised learning means? I'm sure all the community which is available is here would have, in terms of statistics, they would have gone through the algorithms of classification. They have taught classification, they have taught regressions, right? But how does regression, which is primarily trying to see how the the data, they interpret the data in terms of where it is the best fit. Similarly, when we talk about classification, how do we understand whether the whole data can be classified or categorized into various sub verticals, right? This probably at some point of time was only being seen as one of tool, but see in the chain now, right? The classification helps supervise learning, right? Today, whether it is identity fraud detection or image classification or the customer retentions or the diagnostics, they are powered through classification approaches itself, which was probably being taught has been taught for since many years today, right? But today the classification algorithms, classification approach helps supervised learning, in turn helps machine learning, in turn bring in new AI solution. Similarly, regression analysis, which is the very known thing, because I still remember when we were studying, we studied, hey, you have 10,000 customers, right? And you want to optimize your cost of sending email to these 10,000 customers. And the only thing is optimize the cost, which basically means that we were supposed to make a learning out of these 10,000 customers who are most likely, when the email is being sent, let's say having the details of particular product, will actually subscribe to or buy that product, right? So this better understanding of the customer, so that the cost can be optimized of sending an email. Instead of sending an email to 10,000 potential customer, send only to 1,000 potential customers who actually will have 80%, 90% conversion. And that's where we use regressions at that point of time, right? Now today, the same concept is taken forward, right, and applied to whether it is autonomous learning or autonomous vehicle, or to improvement the supply chain, or to other use cases which I am talking about, right? So this is the way I think this overall application of machine learning and the use cases of that. Similarly, let's say clustering. I am sure most of you would have used face recognition algorithms today, right? And when you talk about face recognition algorithms, well, this face belongs to Subodh, and all this images of Subodh is only possible because today clustering approaches, which is unsupervised learning, and the algorithms of unsupervised learning has improved a lot, and real-time calculations can happen as soon as you click a photo, right? Today your phones, which could be very simple smartphones, are able to tell now that there is Subodh in the photo, for example, right? This was not possible, I'll tell you, almost just a decade back, right? I was from the same field. We were not able to do this whole understanding, our calculations within the given amount of time, so that it brings in the right customer experiences, right? So this is where the whole improvement in the unsupervised learning, algorithms and unsupervised learning, and also the processing power and the devices which have really helped to now bring in the new customer experiences, as you would have seen in your in your latest phones, for example, right? So this is very few examples of applications. But what is also important is that what is the potential, right? Today, why companies like Google, why companies like Apple, why companies like Microsoft and Amazon are spending billions to create the products and services which are powered by AI. The only reason because there is a huge market, right? If these companies are spending, right, $120 billion collective on AI products and services, they strongly believe, and this is the belief which market has, right, there is a future in terms of product and services. If you want to further ensure that your market share, your products, are further being loved by people, used by customers, right, they must, bring in new experience. And hence AI today is the technology where the spending is so huge. And it's just not just that in companies, even within the university ecosystem, for example, right? It's just one case, right? MIT alone is investing $1 billion, right? And doing what? Basically to solely to devote the whole learning around computing and AI, right? And this basically goes hand in hand, because industry is looking forward to create solution, and to create solution you require a trained, skilled manpower, and skilled manpower will come from educational institutions. And hence you can really see, if industry is spending $20 billion, an institute like MIT alone is spending $1 billion, right? And this is the global ecosystem. And hence we also actually probably will help a lot, because once we understand the need, and once we understand the importance of the technology, once we understand what future the technology has in its hold, then we clearly are aware of it. And the policymakers, especially whether it is in the companies or the educational ecosystem, must be aware of. And that's the reason why NEP has come out. And I think we need to further that thought process, that there is a policy now in hand, there is an initiative in hand, and how do we bring it as a practice in terms of teaching new technologies, right? Even if from the perspective AI ML, from NEP itself, NEP has already acknowledged, as I said earlier, right, the pivotal role played by, and as Dr. Pandey was saying, the pivotal role these emerging technologies are playing. But what is more important is to now align the curricula, right? The curriculum, to prepare the students for this AI economy, right? So this is very important for us now, that we start looking into not just the framework in which we are today, because I think this audience today is more coming from college level educational ecosystem, but even for K-12, right, even for the school education, it is important that, and I think NEP touches upon that as well, that we have to bring in the concepts, the contemporary subjects like AI and design thinking. And again, why design thinking? Design thinking is not a technology. Design thinking is just the approach, right? It helps people to think more towards what they want to achieve, and then break it down from that achievement in terms of what the product is, to break it down to the requirement. And hence design thinking, which is a key role today, a key technology, key principles in which a lot of companies are working to create new product and solutions, right? So whether it is understanding of topics like big data or machine learning or data analytics, I think all this is important, and that's why NEP has given a special emphasis. And most important is that whatever we teach in our educational ecosystems, and this is often said, I'm not probably saying it for the first time, is often said, has to be aligned with the need of the industry, because industry is going to create products and solutions. Educational institutions are supposed to prepare skilled manpower, and also to the furthering the research part. So they have both roles to play. One is at the top of the pyramid, which is the research activity, and at the bottom of the pyramid, which is in the providing of the skilled forces. Because industry pulls in from both. From the bottom of the pyramid, they get the skilled forces, skilled manpower, and from the top of the pyramid, which is the research activities, they pull in the cutting edge research and create products and solutions, right? So industry is looking up to educational ecosystem, and hence NEP, whatever has been determined, what has been already said, is a very important step and very forward step going forward, right? What is important is that how do we get ready for digital future, right? How do we keep up the pace within our education system, especially when we talk about international education system and parity with international education system. I'm sure, I think in last 2 days we would have seen a report in terms of where does our IIT stand, where do our ISC stand today, right? And we are happy to see ISC is one of the leading institution of India, which has probably very good global ranking, but there is still a lot to which can be achieved. Countries like Singapore, right, and countries like Korea, which are very, very small countries, right, or Japan, for example, right, they have more institutes, more academic institutions, which are seen as following best international practices, right? They are seen as imparting both the science and the engineering aspects of the education in the right way, right? And hence it is for our countries also important, how do we keep pace with international education system, right? Similarly, we are known for traditional teaching, right? But traditional teaching has its benefits, but continuous improvement in each and every field is important. And hence, how do we improve our traditional teaching mechanism is also what NEP looks forward to. But as I said earlier, what is the role of AI, for example, right? It's across multiple sectors, but this is just a reiteration again, a reiteration in terms of again, this is what Forbes is telling in terms of their research, and this has come out from the feedbacks, from the surveys of leading institutes, for example, right? Today, across the industry sector, whether it's logistics, cyber security, healthcare, enterprise security, right, information security, financial services, public transportation, cloud computing, e-commerce, I think everywhere AI is playing a key role, right? And what is more important is when there are so many industries which want to adopt AI to create new solutions or services, they need huge amount of skilled manpower and school. There is a requirement which needs to be filled in. And just a snapshot here, right? At least in terms of what a skilled resource power is really required, as per telecom sector skill council, right? India would require 22 million skilled manpower in all these technologies of AI, robotics, and cloud computing and IoT, right? 22 million is a huge number. And how do we really create this skilled manpower by 2025 in the next 3 years, the next 4 years, right? Even the NASSCOM report talks about which only reflects the need for the technology industry, right? It talks about the 300,000 new jobs will be created in AI and big data analytics, right? Of which almost 88,000 are still unfulfilled, right? Whereas industries also talking about whatever manpower they have, they need a reskilling, for example, and hence all of the industry people are now undergoing reskilling courses so that they are better equipped. But then reskilling can only help to skill the people who are already into the or already working somewhere today. But the demand is beyond that. Demand is beyond that of what is availability today, and hence educational institutions are supposed to now take up this as a challenge and create a job pool, create a skilled manpower pool, which will be almost be job ready as they come out of the college ecosystem, right? Hence, this is only just to re-emphasize that it is important that we understand these technologies. It's also important that we quickly come up with the new curricula. We talk about the digital schools, we talk about the future skills, right? We talk about the new technologies, but it's important to bring in the structured approach of educational within the educational ecosystem, right? Whether it is the reports of Deloitte or IT, and again, the reason I'm trying to put this out is just to re-emphasize that there are today plenty of if somebody has to validate the need, there are already the validation has been done. Now it is time to deliver, right, in terms of skilled manpower, right? Whether it is a survey done by the Capgemini, which is 54% of organizations said there's a talent gap, which basically means that this talent gap, when 54% of the half of the companies being surveyed are saying that there is a gap between what talent they require versus what talent is available, I think this is the right time when we need to work in the educational ecosystem of understanding, creating right skilled manpower, right? Again, a few more statistics, but why it is also important, because when we talk about today, right, that we are in terms of gross value add, right, of within the country, right, the AI has potential to at least add $1 trillion to Indian economy by 2035. Now, $1 trillion digital economy is a huge addition, which is going to come in only from the AI and AI technologies, right? Whether it is intelligent automation, whether it is augmentation in the form of efficiency augmentation, or augmentation in terms of production, right? Or when we talk about the factor of productivity, right? Overall productivity, whether it's agriculture produce, whether it is factory produce, right? It needs to improve upon. And this whole ecosystem of intelligent automation, human and machine intervention, productivity will actually going to add $1 trillion. And this is is happening. This is no more a futuristic value. This is really a real value in terms of what potential AI has for within a country like India itself alone, right? Now, how have international education system, which I talked about earlier, that I'll also try to bring in, the second aspect, right? From a technology perspective, probably I thought I'll touch very basics, but touch upon the market part, the need part, but also how is the international education system is keeping pace with the development within the AI and ML. And that's important, and this again was a learning for me also as well, right? When we looked into various K-12 segment curriculum, right, and what other countries are doing, it was good to see that a country like South Korea, right, a small country which started, has been focused on bringing the various technology elements in their K-12 segment alone, right? Now, it is just not even in 2020 they started talking about, AI, but beginning 2015, right? The last which I was able to find out in 2015, Korean curriculum, mandated their whole education system in K-12 to bring in the technology of the day in 2015. 2015, it was all about computational thinking, computational technologies, right? So they brought in 2015 and going forward 2015, the computational part of technology into the education ecosystem. But in 2020, they said computational has created, and computational, when you talk about computational, you talk about coding, you talk about, the algorithms, you talk about flow charting, you talk about languages, you talk about, the CPUs, GPUs, etc., and how do you bring in new OS, etc., right? But after that, now they've gone back into say that beginning 2020, that AI, is the core task which needs to be taught in the K-12 segment alone, right? And and further, now they have already said that from elementary through high school, right? Now, no public school, and in fact, there were no public school which are teaching AI, as an independent subject in 2021. However, now, as we speak, there are already a lot of educational ecosystem, K-12, within K-12, they've been able to bring in multiple courses around AI, whether it is AI basics or AI mathematics, right, are now inducted within the K-12 segment. It's important because I'm re-emphasizing K-12 because once in the foundation, you are able to bring in these technologies, automatically the college level education and the undergrad and the postgrad and the research level education will bring in technology as a curricula, to be taught, right? What is also important that what was the framework in which they did, right? Very clearly, this was the framework, and this is again a learning which I thought may be good to share, right? It is important that and I'm sure this goes with every topic which is being taught in education system. First is the basic understanding around the topic needs to be created, right? Then within the AI, because AI and data go hand in hand, right? So it is important that we talk about AI and data. Then when we have AI and data, we talk about AI algorithms, right? Then we talk about how do we bring in, how do we implement these, implementation of AI, and then we talk about how AI will impact the everyday life, because this is the way students will be able to really relate to. And if these categories are broken down in the top 5 categories of the AI is like this, today between grade 1 to 5, which is the junior school, already they have given a structure in place, right? That within understanding of AI, very simple AI stories will be taught into the grade 1 and grader 1 and grader 2 student itself, which basically is trying to incite the little minds, right? That what does AI all about through a storytelling, right? And again, it's I think we have been doing it in our education, but how do we bring in the same stories, the pedagogy of storytelling, but change the stories so that now we talk about more of AI stories, right? And this is what already within Korea they have structured it, and this is something which probably I'm assuming is already started to happen as well, right? Similarly, grade 3 graders, 3 and 4 graders, they are told about what does strong AI and weak AI really means with respect to examples, right? So that they understand that what does just not the basic concept of the AI, but also about 2 different classification of AI. Right. Similarly, when they move to grade 5 and 6, they talk about AI versus human, right? Paradox, right? How does human thinking and AI thinking can be different? And this is the way the pedagogy has been defined. And according to this pedagogy today, I think this chart clearly shows that within once you are going from grade 1 to grade 6, you are very much familiar of the basic concepts of AI. You're familiar with AI and data, about various number guessings. You're familiar with AI algorithms. You're familiar with classifications. Classification again being taught through same examples which were probably did earlier, right? But also about how AI is, bringing everyday life changes, for example, right? And hence relationship is also built in from the AI education perspective. And this is only in junior school. Once you look into the middle school, for example, right? Today in Korea, they've already mandated 1 hour mandatory, per week class, right? I think 34 weeks is the total duration in a year. So 1 hour per week is now mandatory for within the grade 5. Again, it's mandatory in the junior school, but here it is mandatory that the education itself will be through, a software itself, right? So that it is not the teachers which are teaching, but it is the software which is basically teaching people, right? Teaching students, right? So this is actually helping them that how, concept of AI is being built up by real-time use cases as well, right? Similarly, now within this middle school, they have been given projects, for example, right? Projects so that they can so that they can apply within their own projects the various concepts of AI, right? And this is, I thought, is a very good approach, because you have defined what are the different categories, what are different strategies, and what is the specific plan to serve that, to serve that mandate in a structured way from junior school to middle school and to high school, for example, right? In fact, in Korea, already there is a plan to convert high school into 2 different categories, right? One which is dedicated enough to AI education exemplary schools. In fact, they are talking about converting 15% of their schools to AI based schools, completely dedicated AI based schools, so that students have a choice to take this as a career beginning high school itself. And this is not just within Korea. I think this is also happening in US, where students are able to take within their high school and going forward take the electives based upon their choices. And this is where NEP also talks about, because they're talking about flexible education, but today flexible education is being brought into, if my understanding serves me right, it is towards the undergrad study, not to within the K-12 segment. But the world over, especially the sorry, I request
ये अनुराग जी आप अपनी माइक्रोफोन को ऑफ कर लीजिए अनुराग जी.
Okay, thank you. So this is a proper plan if you really see, right? Today 34 schools in 2020 have adopted, they have been categorized as Center for AI Convergence Educations, right? These numbers are growing further, right, between the Center for AI Convergence, and this is proper roadmap in which the things are already happening. Similarly, AI education exemplary schools, which is again I talked about. There are now basic some remaining 85% where there are a lot of activities are happening in the form of clubs. The activities happening in terms of mandatory subjects in the AI, for example, right? And most of these high schools are now being tracked and monitored with respect to whether they are teaching AI programming, they are teaching AI basic principle, they are teaching AI use or not, but they're teaching not just the AI but the ethical use of AI also, right? So this is actually creating a foundation of AI education. If we just take a snapshot of what is happening in Korea, and this is further, another case study talks about, again in Canada, for example, right? Now Canada also has recognized very clearly the AI is very important, and hence they have integrated AI into courses like computing science, robotics, automation, right, throughout Canada, right? And also they have defined a mechanism in which pan India, how do you bring in pan Canada, how do you bring the new framework for computer education, right? Similar again, the Canada has taken more of an approach of bringing the AI module, the study on the AI module, right, through a computer education. I think it can be muted.
अविनाश जी आप अपनी माइक्रोफोन को म्यूट कीजिए. वैसे ये सेंट्रली हम लोग यहाँ से उसको म्यूट कर रहे हैं. ठीक है, okay, yes sir, continue.
Yeah. So sorry again. I think in the K-12 segment of Canada, right? It is very clearly a similar structure which was seen, right? Basic start. How do you bring in the next levels of learning? How do you develop the learning, right? With respect to basic algorithms. How do you allow the learner providers, which is the educationals, right? The teachers, right? How they can access, right, various technical systems and the libraries so that they can teach to AI and on not just AI but also talk about human biases, right? When you talk about AI, right? And then going further, talk about learning, machine learning, feedback mechanisms towards learning, and also ethical challenges. So if you see, the structure is very clearly the same what we saw in Korea. In Canada, education also has the similar structure in terms of education framework which they've created, leading from basic start to critical thinking of the whole K-12 segment, and the people who are coming out of, also students who are coming out of the K-12 segment, right? This is again, this was important from the fact of how K-12 is now getting evolved for AI and ML, but also how about undergraduate courses in AI and ML. Just few examples, like Carnegie Mellon, which is NAS, one of the best universities, known universities, right, was the first to offer a bachelor's degree in AI in way back in 2018 itself, right? And this again, the reason I'm talking about this very clearly because this shows that AI, universities across the world have seen that advantage of bringing and teaching, within the undergrad, creating a new degree, new focused study altogether, right? Whether is Bachelor of Science in AI, whether it's Masters of Science in AI and Innovations, right? And I think this is the new topics which is typically being taught in the form of a degree. This is important because when you create a degree around an AI, you are actually talking about not talking about the basics of AI, but also bringing all elements of AI, and hence the people who will come out of these batches, right? They are well trained, highly trained people, right, within the space of AI, and they will fuel the new generation of product and solutions and services, right? And if Carnegie Mellon is doing it, similarly, one more slide was there in terms of what is important for, if somebody is coming in the, a Bachelor of Science in AI, which is interdisciplinary. Again, interdisciplinary is the key because interdisciplinary approach is also being talked about in NEP 2020, right? How do we bring interdisciplinary approach towards giving education which is more targeted, right? And hence, if you see here, a student has to have mandatory course of maths and science faculty, maths and stats, computer science, ethics, then based upon this, and humanities and arts as well. So across, various departments which were probably working in silos earlier, right? Now a course like, Bachelor of Science in AI is actually bringing interdisciplinary courses, and student has to go through course of humanities and art, has to have certain classes in maths and statistics, some certain classes in ethics, and then he gets more more learning in terms of the basic the core courses of AI, right? And hence AI core, AI cluster electives, all that is you will able to, when a student will be able to appreciate once they have the basic foundations in place, right? Now again, this particular course, for example, is being delivered through instructors from various departments, and again, this is something which has been happening. I don't think this is not happening, but it's just about applying ourselves right today, together, and how our interdisciplinary approach can create a new course which is important within the space of AI. Similarly, Stanford University, right, and they have now graduate certificates in AI, right? They have probably, we could see, instead of having a degree courses, they have created multiple graduate certificates in AI, and each of these courses requires, similarly taking certain electives and certain mandatory courses, right? But what is more important is it is not just about AI principles and techniques which has been taught as a required course, but various clearly electives, which is electives in terms of, again, this is kind of branching off because this is a certification course, hence this becomes more specialized course, right? The branch in terms of decision making, branching in terms of computational logic, branching in terms of robotics, branching in terms of natural language processing with deep learning. I think this is where the certificate course of Stanford University is trying to create a skilled manpower around AI again, they do offer a Bachelor of Science in computer science, again, which includes AI. But Bachelor of Science in computer science has been taught today also in India. All BTech degrees in computer science, they've been taught AI as electives also, or AI as a course also. But topping that up with a certificate course, topping that up with the very focused courses, and especially bringing interdisciplinary approach is important the way forward, right? Similarly, in terms of masters, again, whether it is multiple institutes we could see, right? Multiple institutes and top institutions are offering courses of AI ML, whether it is MIT, Stanford, Harvard, California Institute of Technology, or Caltech, right? I think all the leading institutes, this is just a snapshot, right? All the leading, and I'm sure there will be Indian institutes as well, right? All the leading institutes are today offering master courses in AI and ML. Again, the reason, again, I'll reiterate, they are doing it because there is a strong potential and there's strong need, there's a gap which needs to be filled in, and hence this is something which needs to happen in our educational ecosystem, not just within IITs and ISCs, but across all educational systems. And I'm looking forward that within Patna University, if there are certain courses like this, good. If there are not, then some of these courses really should be started up in the Patna University as well, right? Again, there are certain prerequisites. I'll share this, but it's important that even bodies like UNESCO, right, have created an advisory board so that its member countries can really learn not just what needs to be taught in this AI, but within the skilling, what are the right frameworks. That's the framework which I showed earlier from the examples of Korea or from the examples of Canada. What are the real frameworks in which the educational ecosystem can be evolved into? So UNESCO itself is coming forward to bringing their own frameworks of study, and I'm sure within our ecosystem, UGC and AICT, they have and obviously from the K-12 segment perspective, these CPSCs of the world, they have enough thinking and enough think tank and available that they should be able to come out with the frameworks very clearly in a time bound way, because time is also running out of our hands as we move forward, right? So this is again something which is there, but in terms of teaching also, right, it is also important that how is teaching mechanisms are evolving, right, with respect to AI. There are very few examples here, right? Whether it is answering questions today, I'm sure each of you as an educator would have thought this is a mundane task, this is a repetitive task, right? If it's mundane and repetitive, why it can't be delivered with AI? It can be delivered with AI, right? Whether it is answering certain questions, right? So hence, if we within our ecosystem, within our educational ecosystem, if we bring in AI powered chatbots, right, which can probably give answer to generic and repetitive questions, then think about the time which it saves for yourself, right? And hence, within the institutes, we need to start thinking about bringing these approaches in our way of handling students, for example, right? Even that goes same thing with a better understanding, right? Today, AI can give teachers a clear picture of which subjects and lessons needs to be reevaluated, for example, right? How many times you would have seen, it is very tough to, and becomes very individualistic in nature, that whether this subject has been understood by my students or not. Within my class, how many have well understood this subject or not? It is very subjective in nature, and technology and especially AI can bring in the right analytics, right, so that whether the current learning programs are helping students or not, what improvements are required, which are the students which are not been able to cope up with your current learning programs, and hence you may have to create a different approach towards that subset of students, for example, right? This is, and again, this can be applied. This is not something which is something which is supposed to happen in future. This is something which is already happening. When you talk about task automation, when industry is doing task automation, why not education institutes, right? I've got a lot of administrative work, a lot of grading sheets, and I think OMRs, etc., has been able to automate a lot of tasks earlier. But I think there's still constant thinking is required. How do we bring in, what is repetitive in nature? How do we bring in, these repetitive tasks to be automated through AI, right? I think this is to be done on a constant basis, so that within educators, within yourself, you have free time available to think about and to impart the next wave of technology and solutions to the students, right? Similarly, in terms of content, and I think today COVID has really helped a lot, because before this COVID era, the content creation was itself not, a lot of educators had difficulties in terms of bringing into slides in terms of what they really want to teach about. But today, everybody is comfortable. Everybody is able to create content. Everybody is able to, educate or impart education by virtue of presentations and the various smart contents which are coming in. Hence, while AI can bring in more smartness, but it's good that we have a good start today, and this start needs to be continued, in an educational ecosystem, right? Similarly, when you talk about students, right, there are today, whether it is personalized learning, whether it is access to, again, this is access to all forms of content, all forms of information, right? From a global ecosystem perspective, this is something which is happening today. Libraries are connected, right? I'm sure the libraries have gone digital, right? Research papers are available to the student community, and they've been able, not just because of AI, but because of digitalization which has happened, right? But digitalization now has to be powered through AI, because once there is enough information, finding right information becomes very difficult, right? And hence, whether it is personalized learning, universal education, or in some cases, enhanced learning mechanisms, this is where AI has a lot of role to play in terms of how students can really learn, right? One of the I think more of the what I wanted to cover mostly was the two major topics I've covered at this point in time. I thought one more topic which I want to really cover, and this is something which is really fascinating topic, and this has been fascinating me, so I thought why not share the same thoughts, right? AI and ML in terms of social impact, right? Today we talked about use cases of logistics, we talked about use cases about supply chain, we talked about use cases of bringing efficiency in the fourth industrial revolution perspective. But think about whether AI and ML has social impact, whether when you talk about environmental challenges, right, whether there is enough capability within AI and ML as a technology to bring in new ways of improving our planet, for example, right? In fact, answer is yes. Googles of the world, IBMs of the world, they are today using AI not just to bringing in how to reduce the energy, for example, right? Because we all know energy leaves its carbon footprint, right? So hence, when we talk about digital world, we also trying to today Googles of the world are working. How do you reduce the energy in terms of when the huge amount of data is getting created? Data centers are popping up left, right today, and they are known to be energy guzzlers, right? How do we reduce energy dependency in our data centers, right? How do we bring in better efficient ways of cooling? And AI is actually helping them to make right decisions and hence reduce the energy cost also. Similarly, IBM is using today AI tools for weather forecasting, right? And weather forecasting really helps, because now when you have right weather forecasting in place, from an industry perspective, right, you can think about how advantages of various segments of industry it is bringing in, right? Whether it is renewable energy production, right understanding of the weather, and a futuristic, not just 1 day in advance or 2 day in advance, right? A long-term weather forecasting really helps to set up new renewable energy production, for example, right? Similarly, Excel Energy is now talking about a coal burning, and how does AI can reduce its bring in better understanding of the energy consumption, so that the energy generation using coal can be further reduced, right? This is also happening further, because today it is just not about the industry verticals which are talking about, but there are also robots which are coming into play. In fact, the fascinating study about how LG AI research created a new robot altogether. This robot was able to do what human was not able to do. For example, the robot was able to create garments from a discarded or repurposed materials, right? They were able to create this which garments because this whole robot was able to think in multiple possibilities which probably human mind was not able to think for that. And hence, think about this thing. Now we at one place you're using AI to reduce the energy footprint and to reduce the carbon footprint, but at the same time you're also trying to say how AI can be able to reduce the waste which is already available, and whether certain technologies can find out what is reusable waste, how can I really create a recyclable version of the same waste. And hence some of these things are already happening. Also, in terms of what is, in terms of study also, right? Now today, when you talk about monitoring of AI, for the emissions, right, and predicting the futures, the AI is also playing a role. So all the emissions part, right, today are now being looked into how they can be monitored through various AI algorithms, and how this can be predicted in future, right? So that we take a proactive action rather than reactive action, right? So this is where AI is able to help to bring in the climate, take the right steps in the direction of the climate. Climate protection, for example, right? Whether it is, so as I said, just to sum it up, right? Climate change or the biodiversity classifications, or whether you are trying to make your oceans more healthy, or whether it is a problem of water security and water scarcity, whether it is the need for clean air, whether it is a need for weather and disaster management. I think everywhere you will find today that AI powered solutions are actually helping. Whether it is sustainability in terms of in terms of understanding how our oceans are getting polluted, for example, or whether understanding how do you create catchment areas, what are the best way of creating catchment areas for the water scarcity to be solved, right? Or as I talked about in terms of clean air, how do you monitor the emission levels of what we are generating today, so that clean air can be produced and clean air environment can be produced in the future. This is where AI is playing a very, very critical role, and technologies related to AI is actually playing a very critical role, so that we are able to safeguard our planet. I think from a perspective, a holistic overview about the climate perspective, right? So again, multiple such examples which are which I think I'll share, but I'm not going to cover. So in fact, one of the very basic, I saw this forest fire, right? I think most of our in news we would have said, we have read about or heard about that there are forest fires which are not obviously they are not detected early, and hence the forest fires results in loss of lot of flora and fauna of the whether the forest catches fire. But this today, countries like the countries, I think it was Egypt, right? Oh, sorry, it is Chile, right? They were able to now come up with a pilot project, and they were able to put sensors in the forest which were able to detect the early signs, very, very early signs of the fires in the forest, right? And hence every one of us know, if early detection can happen, and then accordingly preventive mechanism can happen, and hence these the sensors are giving the right data, and the data is being analyzed through AI algorithms to give the real-time early detection of the forest fires. And this is something which is already being deployed at scale level now, and I think this will be a huge change when we talk about reducing forest fire, and hence reducing loss through forest fires, right? So this is one such examples. Similarly, I think another such example was again, this is the example which I was Chile example which I was talking about, right? So now today, so imagine now with the deployment of these sensors, they are saying we have been able to detect the fire, which was earlier 12 minutes, fire 12 minutes before, now to almost real time, right? So immediately they have now we have been detecting fire for 12 minutes before traditional methods. Basically, it means that you get advantage of time in terms of taking proactive actions when a catastrophe like fire example is there, right? Again, this is more in terms of climate, but one thought which I probably want to leave is the future of AI is not just about the data, also it is also about less data, right? This is important to understand because as we talk about further and further AI being trained through data, decision making coming from data, more data points being created through sensors, right? And these sensors require energy, I think we are talking about a world where we are creating a balance between the advantage versus the energy consumptions, or what we want to deploy has to be seen, right? And hence the future is not about data interpretation of sensors, but the future is also in terms of less data, right? So hence we need to constantly think, and this is where researcher community, the educators have to play a lot of role in terms of how do we bring in more efficiency in our approach towards AI, and hence bring in less data sensitive applications, right? Which does not require huge systems to be built, right? This is something which is way forward, and hence this is where the researcher community has to move forward. I think with those thoughts, again, I would like to just close my thoughts and ready for any questions. I know I probably I took a couple of minutes extra.
Excellent presentation, Shri Subodh Sachan ji, on the very the topic artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the basic purpose of today's program was to make the teachers community in the state of Bihar aware about the potential of artificial intelligence and machine learning. You have covered from the basics to the application part and the happenings in the field of AI and ML in the international arena. There may be the participants might like to ask a few questions. तो हम लोग जो पार्टिसिपेंट्स हैं, अगर आप कोई ऐसी बात पूछना चाहते हो जो आपके मन में है, हिंदी या अंग्रेजी जिस माध्यम से हो, आप उसे पूछ सकते हैं। बल्कि आपने प्रेजेंटेशन में इस चीज़ को भी सुना कि एआई और एमएल का एक ये भी एजुकेशन सेक्टर में योगदान है कि अगर हम अपनी भाषा को अपने माध्यम से, जो इंटरनेशनल भाषा है, उसे अपनी भाषा में समझने जानने के लिए संप्रेषित करना चाहते हैं, तो उसमें भी इसका ये बड़ा योगदान होता है। So the most important aspect of today's program was to make the teachers aware about what AI is all about and what are the different applications of AI. So very good presentation. Or teachers, if you wish to ask, we may take a few questions, one or maybe 2 to 3 questions.
Sir, Namaskar, sir. This is Madhu Kumari Gupta from Madan Mahila College, Department of Chemistry. So one question is there. We are using lots of artificial intelligence instruments in our society, or in our home, or in colleges. With the advent of this AI in education policies, there will be large heaps of unused devices in our country. Is there any policy regarding that, how to utilize it, or how to use it, or we can say how can we manage that e-waste?
Well, I think see.
So, is there any?
Right now, you talked about probably a different thing which has much more wider what do you call problem, right? Because e-waste generation, right? E-waste generation is also a big problem, right? I think you rightly said. There is a lot of obsolete items which are lying in our storerooms today, right? Some of these equipments are outdated, and because technology has been changing so fast, right? So there is already, and I think government of, if I'm not wrong, at least in STPI, like we talked about, we have defined a very clearly e-waste policy, and my ministry is also very clearly defined. Ministry of Electronics and IT has defined various e-waste policy initiative, right, in terms of what needs to be done. Today, if I recall very correctly, there is a framework through which e-waste recyclers have been created across the country, right? They are ready to take the e-waste again, and then they are able to recycle by virtue of segregation, right, and bring in certain components back to the ecosystem and extract the certain components from the perspective of what is already lying there. But in terms of equipment creation, let me tell you, because I have come from the same ecosystem where we were trying to create devices like these, right? Devices like phones, right? Or devices like watches, right? There is a strong standardization already happening there, right? Standards have been created that most of these devices have to be created from recyclable e-waste, right? So this devices should not have anything which cannot be recycled, right? So creation itself is now, the standards around the creation itself are improving a lot, right? So to one end, you're trying to improve the creation part. On another end, how do you handle the recycler or the e-waste? I think both sides there are policy frameworks. I may not be the right person in terms of telling you right policy, but let me tell you this is happening. But what is important from our perspective? What is important from our perspective is understand. Obviously, we don't buy something which we are not really supposed to use, for example, right? So hence, judicious use is very important. This is again a problem in terms of when we create, we have created multiple labs, right? And probably there's too much of repetition of equipments and underutilization of equipments, right? And utilization, it is well understood that each equipment has shelf life, right? In terms of technology shelf life as well as usable shelf life, right? Now, we need to open up our labs, within education ecosystem and allow more and more use of equipment, because equipment's life cycle is fixed, whether it is used or not used, right? So A, buying decisions needs to be better. B, usage frameworks and policies which is completely at your hands must be created. And as I said, from creation perspective and from recycling perspective, there are enough standardizations and policies in place today.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I am Javed Ahmed from RK College, Madhubani, Department of Education. My question is, sir, is there any program from Skill India to train AI and ML for teacher educators in coming days? Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, maybe there would be, but I'm not aware. But let me get back to you. I will find it out somewhere, and I'll send this as soon as I'm able to find information. I'll share that with Dr. Pandey.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, are we going to impart subjects through AI or AI through subjects?
If you remember, if you recall my presentation, I said both as possible, right? Both should be doable, right? Some things should be taught. Complete subjects taught through AI, answer is no, right? Yeah. Part of the subject, part of the topic taught through AI, answer is yes. Right?
Yeah, there are so many subjects we can't apply AI in those subjects, and yes, all those technical subjects.
You're right. But again, this is a constant thinking which you must have, right? See, when we're talking about humanities as a subject, right? Understanding psychology. What is understanding psychology? I'm not a student of psychology, but understanding psychology is trying to understand the behaviors, right? And by set of such, it's a scientific approach. If it is a scientific approach, it can be done through some part of that can be done through AI, right? Some part of that can be taught through AI as well, right? So we need to constantly think.
Yeah, sir. One more thing I want to ask कि ये जो हम लोग sir we are installing so many sensors at so many rivers and other air monitoring quality stations and all those things for environment perspectives. तो सर उसकी बजाय यदि हम कुछ ऐसा इंस्टॉल कर सकें या ऐसा रिसर्च क्या हो रहा है कि जिसमें हम उसकी मॉनिटरिंग की बजाय सिर्फ मॉनिटरिंग की बजाय उसकी क्लीनिंग पे ज़्यादा ध्यान दे सकें. Only monitoring is not enough at river side or any environmental perspective, you can say, any other environmental perspective, air, soil, any other.
No, you're right. If you're saying if the pollutants from the river are to be removed, right? Why don't we apply devices which can reduce the pollutants? Okay. That is something which is something which is very important, right? But what is also important is to check whether pollutants are coming in. See, you will solve the problem once, right?
So there are so many other measures to check all these things. But how can we reduce these pollutions or other things or any types of things? AI or any machine learning?
I'll request the participants to have only one question, no counter question. This is just a discussion part. So I think everybody to please cooperate so that the rest of the participants, they may also ask any question. So I think two last questions now.
Sir, I have a question about AI.
Yes, Chirantanji, you may ask your question.
Thank you, sir. Sir, it was about a feeling of being spied continuously over my devices, because when I use several devices and I find that what I was doing on one device is chasing me on another device. So which means I'm being continuously spied, and it's kind of a feeling which makes me feel quite insecure, particularly when one has to do so many financial operations through these digital devices. Many other things are also quite private, but then there's no certainty about any privacy on the digital sphere. So what would you say about this feeling of insecurity and how AI can make us feel more secure?
Now, see, I'll put this way: fear of unknown, right? So, fear of unknown is always there, and it will remain there, especially something which is as intangible as AI, right? I mean, it is purely something, it's, something is there here. What is there, you don't know, right? It can detect my face, you don't know what else it is finding it out, right? So, fear of unknown will always be there. But let me tell you, today, the access to privacy is very important aspect, right? And the usage frameworks are evolving already. So both privacy and the usage frameworks as a mandatory requirement is being put forward. If companies like Apple, they are being tracked now, right? What data they capture and what data they share. Companies like Google, they are tracked, they are monitored, and that's where the governments of the day are, to ensure that the citizens' privacy, the citizens' data is not misused, right? But there will always be something other, because today in the digital world altogether, it's not a problem for AI, it is a problem in digital world, right? In the problem in digital world, this will always be the case, because you as user will always leave behind your digital footprints, right? When you're accessing, let's say, website, when you're buying something, when you're opening up your banking portal, you're leaving behind digital footprint, right? This digital footprint is maybe misused, right? And hence, the whole evolution needs to happen in terms of the cyber security, in terms of regulation of what products are supposed to capture and are capturing, and most important, whatever they are capturing, how are they sharing, whether it is being shared in the form of anonymized data, or it is sent as with all the parameters, right? So the frameworks and the legislations are moving forward. For example, data privacy law, if you see, was already tabled in Parliament, right? It talks about data at a national level, right? Similarly, today, last week, my ministry has come up with data governance framework, right? Now they talk about the data which is being collected by government and why government should become more responsible, right? Because a lot of data is being collected by governments, right? No, whether governments there should be a rule on government, answer is yes. What kind of rules should be there in the government to access data, use the data? Along Aadhaar, there was so much controversy earlier, right? But all that is answered by virtue of defining rules and frameworks around access and privacy. So this is something which is a constant matter, and we'll see a constant evolution, right? But as we need to also be very clear. Most of the time, it is not about the digital footprint you leave. It is the carelessness which results in some of these issues, right? And this, we'll see more examples of being careless. That's why we are subjected to frauds, right? Somebody calls me saying, hey, tell me the OTP. We don't know. We believe the person is the bank guy and we tell the OTP, right? The digital footprint, we leave it. We don't know. OTP was created for securing it, but somebody fooled us, and hence we gave the OTP, and then we are saying, hey, our money has been taken because digital banking was enabled. It is not a fault of digital banking. Okay. I think that will be my answer.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so now one last question from the participants. Anybody?
Sir,
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Sir,
sir.
sir, am I audible?
Yes,
Yes.
you are audible, Ruchi. This is, yes.
Sir, this I don't know if exactly this is a question, but this is also for Atul sir and both of you. Like throughout the lecture, I could understand that AI adds a lot to personalized learning. That is what is useful for educators. But as a part, or you can say as a stakeholder of a traditional university, what I feel is AI would take a lot of time to reach us. So can there be a alternative program where teachers are trained to think like AI, or like human training is like we can access and think like AI and do the same in the classroom, like something like this, because it will take, maybe I'll retire till the time we have all access to AI in Patna University.
No,
So
no.
as a teacher, how can I myself think like a machine, learn like a machine, and make it useful? That's why I said it's for Atul sir also, because he's the director of our HRDC who imparts training. So
So
Okay, so
over to you, sir.
before I request Subodh Sachan ji to elaborate upon the question which have been put forward by Ruchi, let me first once again elaborate to the participants that the HRDC Patna University, we are just in the process of making the teacher, educators and the ecosystem which we have in our state to know about the AI and ML, the concept, the advantages, the application part of AI and ML. As now we are into the transition phase. So it's a very important for all of us here in the state of Bihar to at least have the concept of AI, and the participants from whatever discipline you may be, as earlier mentioned by Subodh Sachan ji, that this AI and ML could be applied to any segment. So that if you are from the law faculty or from the commerce faculty, now getting this background, now you have to think in terms of what could be your concept or utilization which you can make in your teaching, or maybe for your further progress in your educational system's life. So this is just a beginning in the concept of AI. Over to you, Subodh, to further clarify Ruchi's question.
No, I see. The reason why I brought up the two case studies, right, especially from Korea, right, and showed the timelines, right. I think the only reason why I want to bring the timelines in perspective was it should not take ages. Definitely, it should not take more than 2 years or 3 years before the whole education ecosystem brings in the AI education, right? If it is taking years, then we are the purpose of whole of bringing this education of AI into middle schools or junior schools or to the undergrads or postgrad will be completely defeated, because technology would have moved on, right? When we talk about the applications of AI today, we're talking about next 10 years in horizon, right? So within next 10 years horizon, I would love to see multiple such technologies intervention happening within your retirement, before you retire, right? So before you retire, you should not just see the AI and machine learning being taught well, but other technologies also coming into play, right? So every 5 years, every 10 years, you must think, how do you bring in, an educational ecosystem has to bring in. You are as much part of this educational ecosystem as Dr. Pandey is, or as we are. So we have supposed to do that. Now, coming to training part, coming to part about whether there could be courses created. I think this is where I strongly believe, right? I strongly believe that some NGOs need to come forward as well, right? I've seen an example in Canada, right? There is an NGO in the form of foundation. Now they have brought forward multiple resources which educators can use. They've only focused upon what tools and technologies and learning educators require to teach some new technology, for example, right? And they've only created a compendium of the same, right? It was probably not possible within the educational ecosystem to someone to go and create it. But an NGO which is run by professionals, which is run by technology people, they were able to work together with the educational ecosystem and create the framework, create the content, create the libraries, as well as create the mechanisms of delivery to teach educators. This is something I strongly believe must happen in India. Probably it is happening, I'm not aware, right? But this is something which is a way forward, because this technology learning in a constant way. Every 10 years, every 15 years is happening and must happen, unless otherwise, it will be very, very difficult. Today, in the 3 decades of IT industry, the reason why our country has been able to progress a lot, why the industry has been able to progress a lot, because we, within the industry, people have been able to learn fast, adapt fast, and flexible enough to reskill themselves, right? But we're talking about the manpower, the force which has come, workforce, right? But how this is going to it should be translated in the educational ecosystem is something which needs to be seen. And I don't think so we have time left that in one lifetime we see only one change. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
ओके, थैंक यू सुबोध सचन जी। और ये बात सही है कि हम लोग AI, ML और दूसरे टेक्नोलॉजीज की बात कर रहे हैं, लेकिन मुख्य उद्देश्य हमारा यही है कि अंतर्राष्ट्रीय पटल पे जो शिक्षा में बदलाव आ रहे हैं वो राष्ट्रीय स्तर पे हो, हम कहीं पहले छूट न जाए। पहले तो हमें इस बात पे अपने आप पे भरोसा रखना है। और हम सभी जानते हैं कि अभी आने वाले दिनों में अंडर ग्रेजुएट में अपने राज्य में CBCS करिकुलम अभी लागू होने वाला है। पटना विश्वविद्यालय के द्वारा इस सत्र में CBCS के कंटेंट आएंगे और उसमें बहुत सारी संभावनाएं हैं जो कुछ परिवर्तित करेंगी हमारी सोच को, हमारे पाठ्यक्रम को। और उसमें मुझे लगता है निश्चित रूप से AI और ML का कंपोनेंट भी कहीं ना कहीं अलग अलग विषयों में है। तो थैंक यू वंस अगेन। और मैं रिक्वेस्ट करता हूँ, आग्रह करता हूँ पटना विश्वविद्यालय के भूगर्भ शास्त्र के असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर श्री भावुक शर्मा जी को कि आप एक अपनी ओर से, अपने सारे साथियों की ओर से, पटना विश्वविद्यालय की ओर से आप धन्यवाद ज्ञापन करेंगे।
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are audible.
Yes, thank you, sir. A very good afternoon to everyone. Respected Professor Atul Pandey, sir, Director, UGC HRDC, Patna University. Our honorable guest speaker, Shri Subodh Sachan, sir, Director, Startup and Innovation, STPI, New Delhi. Faculty members from different parts of Bihar and India, and my dear friends. It's an honor for me to give vote of thanks on behalf of all the participants today. Sir, you have delivered a very comprehensive, informative, and useful and futuristic lecture for all of us on the topic artificial intelligence and machine learning. And sir, you have also discussed in a very nutshell technology intervention in educational ecosystem via artificial intelligence and machine learning. Sir, your lecture was very wonderful. It has been discussed in the most serious way, and because it's a very new topic for all the faculty members, and we have learned a lot from this, and definitely all the things that have been discussed in your lecture will be adapted by all of us in our curriculum also under the leadership of Atul sir and other administrative skills. In the last, thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your precious time, for your lecture. And in the last, I would also like to thank all the technical staff for making this webinar a success. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Pandey sir. Sir, I will share my presentation. आपको भेज दूंगा. आप उसको need basis पे you can forward it to others. Thank you. Namaskar. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
सारे पार्टिसिपेंट्स के लिए एक निवेदन है कि अभी आपको जो गूगल फॉर्म के लिंक दिए जाएंगे फीडबैक के लिए, उसे आप फिलअप करेंगे और उसके बाद फिर हमारे पास वो डेटा में इकट्ठा होगा और फिर हम आप सबों को ये बता पाएंगे। और मुझे लगता है 1-2 दिन का समय भी लग सकता है आपके पास सर्टिफिकेट्स मेल से पहुंचने के लिए। एक और जानकारी, हम लोग प्रयास कर रहे हैं कि हम लोग आने वाले समय में इस तरह के कार्यक्रम करते रहें और मुझे लगता है कि जून के अंतिम सप्ताह में जो हम लोगों का मंथली NEP के ऊपर वर्कशॉप वाला प्रोग्राम है वो हम लोग जून के अंतिम सप्ताह में करेंगे। और वेबिनार के लिए जो विषय हम लोगों को दिए गए हैं उसके लिए हम लोग अगले महीने जुलाई में कुछ दूसरे विषयों पे आप सबों से इस पे जोड़ेंगे। तो अंत में आप सबों को एक बार पुनः बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। नाउ मीटिंग इज ओवर नाउ।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर।
Thank you, sir.
चिरंतन सर नमस्कार, बहुत दिन बाद आपका चेहरा देखने को मिला था सर। सानंदा मैडम नमस्कार।
सर यहाँ जुड़ने का मकसद ही यही था कि आप सबों के दर्शन हो जाए।